I will be joined, I hope, very shortly by 4 panel members, and I'll introduce each of them and then give them an opportunity to talk about the specific project they're working on, and then we'll have a round of Q&A. But as has already been mentioned, my name is John Cairney. I am at the University of Queensland. I am part of our 2032 Office of Games Engagement, which really exists in the university for 2 purposes. One is to make sure that key stakeholders in the run-up and through and beyond 2032 are aware of the vast capabilities that sit within inside the university, everything from sports science to sustainable aviation fuel and all points in between, to make sure that we can support the best games possible here in 2032 and a legacy beyond that, but also to connect up researchers in the institution who may not otherwise be able to connect, or as we sometimes like to say, probably should have connected, but needed a reason or an excuse to connect. And quantum is a great example of that. We were very successful in the quantum applications round that the government had a few months ago, and now have sports scientists working with physicists, which I think is really quite exciting. But that's really enough for me. I am by far and away the least important person in this panel. Could I invite my panel members to come forward and take a seat? And then I will introduce each of them as they sit down and give them an opportunity to tell you a little bit about what they are working on. So at the extreme right to me, we have Dr. Eleanor Trimby from the University of Queensland. Eleanor, perhaps you could give a little bit of a 2 or 3 minute talk on what your project is.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm a physics postdoc based at the University of Queensland, and the project that I work on is aimed at diagnosing concussion in athletes. So as some of you might be aware, there's been increasing concern from neuroscientists in recent years surrounding the risks posed to athletes by head injuries sustained during sporting events and the concussions that these can lead to. In particular, there's been increasing awareness around a correlation between athletes who sustain multiple concussions throughout their sporting careers, or who return to sport too quickly after a concussion before their brain has had sufficient time to recover. There's a correlation between those and athletes who are at risk of developing neurodegenerative diseases in the long term. So it's really clearer than ever the importance of having fast and reliable ways of diagnosing concussion in sports so that we can keep our athletes safe. That way, if an athlete does sustain a knock to the head during an event, a medic can be on call to make a quick decision about whether that athlete is concussed and must leave the field in order to prevent risking further injury, or whether they're okay to continue competing. At the moment, the primary way of making this call is by assessing the behavioral symptoms of the athlete in question and bringing to them some survey questions. And of course, this is a very subjective method of diagnosis. What would be better is if we somehow had a way to look inside that athlete's brain and see how it's functioning and see if that function has been significantly impacted by their head injury in a way that could indicate that they're concussed. And this is where quantum technology comes in. Because actually, when we talk about brain function or brain activity, what we really mean in terms of a physical observable is the movement of charged chemicals around the brain. And whenever we have a movement of charge, there is inherently going to be a magnetic field that is emitted with it. So what we're looking at UQ is integrating precision magnetometers using quantum technology that can be placed next to an individual's scalp and use that to pick up on the magnetic signals that are emitted whenever their brains are active. This way we can get a much more objective view of how that individual's brain is working. And a big focus for us is incorporating that technology in a manner that is portable and comfortable, that could be brought to a sports field to make that diagnosis there and then.
Thank you, Eleanor. Next up, I believe we have Associate Professor Tyler Neely, also from the University of Queensland. Next time we'll ask you to spread yourselves out around the room a little bit more, who will also tell us a little bit about the project that he's working on with his team.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to start off by saying I'm really excited to be at another QX event, so thank you very much to all the organizers out there. I think this is a really great initiative. And also I'm excited to be up here talking about our 2032 Quantum Challenge Grant. I have to admit, when I first heard about this grant scheme, the quantum sports grants, I sort of chuckled to myself a little bit, like, how do you determine the winner of a race if the photo finish determines the outcome? Sorry, Rob. But then peeling back a layer, right, it's like very quickly became, okay, well, this is actually about quantum sensing and how quantum technologies can really make a difference in medical technologies. And we heard, in David's talk a moment ago about how sensing is going to be, kind of one of the nearest and closest use cases and real commercializable potentials for quantum technologies. So our exact project actually relates to one of the things you really care about measuring in medicine, which is basically muscle function, cardiac rhythm. And if you look at the way that it's done, is by measuring the voltage on your skin, so your skin potential. So this is a contact measurement. And it turns out, if you look at the history of this, basically back when people were first understanding the basics about measuring electric fields and electric voltages, pretty much 150 years ago, one of the first things they actually measured was the skin potential. And so here we are 150 years later, and essentially we are doing exactly the same thing clinically. And so I think this use case kind of highlights the potential for quantum technology to really change not only the precision of which you're measuring something, but also the way in which you're doing it. Okay, so being a little more specific, my actual project, my group works with neutral atoms. And how does that help you sense electric fields? Well, you can put them into a state called a Rydberg state, where you highly excite the atom, and that turns out to make them exquisitely sensitive to electric fields. And this is becoming rapidly basically a commercial technology for high frequencies, so the RF or gigahertz regime, where it's really becoming the best-in-class case or example of precision for these electric field measurements. Bioelectric measurements, however, are very low frequency, and this is a big open challenge for the research community and also companies commercializing this technology. And so this is where our grant sits. So we're taking this existing technique and this basically commercial technology, and then pushing it into a regime where there's an open area research to make it work at low frequencies. And if you can do that, you can imagine now, instead of having something stuck to your skin, having to be in contact with the device to make the measurement, you can now do that from a distance. It sounds like kind of a trivial thing, but there's a huge set of use cases. For example, if you're sweaty, if you're moving, i.e. an athlete, right? This would be an enormous advance in terms of how you make these measurements. And there's other ways in which this could impact other aspects of medicine, but I'll leave that possibly to another question. So thank you very much, John.
Well, thanks, Tyler. And next up, we have Dr. Lachlan Oberg from Queensland University of Technology. He's going to tell us about what he's working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, I love Queensland. I was born in Queensland. I was raised in Queensland. And I think it's pretty clear to all of us while we all stay and live in Queensland. #1 state in Australia. And if you don't believe me, look at the NRL, look at the AFL. And now on top of this, we've also got quantum. So it's a trifecta as far as I'm concerned. But unfortunately, there is one thing we're winning at here in Queensland, and in particular Brisbane, which we may not be too happy about. So very unfortunately, we are actually the #1 capital city in Australia in terms of traffic congestion. And the average commuter in Brisbane unfortunately spends up to 84 hours per year sitting in traffic. Now, I don't know about you, but I absolutely hate traffic, which is why I'm very proud to say that in collaboration with our industry partners, Transport and Main Roads, and as well as QSIF, the Queensland University of Technology, for their Q32 grant, is developing and pioneering quantum algorithms to run on the future quantum computers we're going to have here in Queensland and Australia more broadly for transport solutions for our growing population. So what actually does this mean? Because we hear quantum computer, we hear quantum algorithm, and maybe you want a bit more detail. So the quantum computer is the actual device that we're building. So for example, PsiQuantum is going to come here later and they're going to tell us all about what they're doing here in Brisbane. And physicists have been very, very interested in quantum computers for the past 30, 40 years because we know that they have this power to accelerate solutions to some very difficult computational challenges that we have. This is why we love them. This is why we're here. But the quantum computer is actually quite useless unless you have a quantum algorithm to actually run on it. And so as an example, you could go out today, I mean, many of you have laptops, you go buy a Macintosh, looks great, shiny, new, but it's practically worthless unless you can install Outlook, unless you can install Word on it and actually do things. So just like you have software with your normal computer, the important thing is that you have a quantum algorithm for your quantum computer. And these are actually quite difficult to develop. So it's really important that we are future focused and develop algorithms which will work now and progress with the increasing state of quantum technology that we have here. So maybe after all that, you're wondering, what has this got to do with the Olympics, and how can quantum algorithms actually benefit Queensland going forward, especially in an industry context? So let me tell you, so our first project that we want to target here at QUT is absolutely related to Brisbane's public transport network. So in 2022, in the lead up to the Olympic Games, the Queensland government announced their zero emissions vehicle scheme. And so this is fantastic because it means we're making this translation from diesel to electric. And as part of that, every single bus commissioned through TransLink from 2025 onwards is going to be completely electric. Now, this is exciting, but it comes with a really challenging optimization problem associated with it. So when you go from diesel to electric, the big problem is that buses are big vehicles. You've got to charge them, right? You've got to get them to a dedicated charging location, and you've got to charge them multiple times per day in some instances, depending on your route, from anywhere to 10 to 90 minutes. Now, I'm sure we're all aware, when you change the bus routes around, it gets people very upset, right? So we want to maintain the same bus routes, but with these electric vehicles, which means we've got to figure out how to roster these vehicles such that they maintain our existing services, but also are able to get all the way up to Rochdale, to the electric bus charging stations and future bus charging stations that Queensland is planning. And it's our hope that these algorithms we develop now for bus technology and rostering in the near term are going to benefit the 2032 Olympics, because of course you have to get to these venues somehow, right? You're going to be able to get on a bus, get public transport, and this is extremely important, not just for the participants in the events, but also for all of us Queenslanders who will be going to see them.
Thanks very much, Lachlan. As someone who drives in the city regularly, I think I speak on behalf of everyone when I say, keep up the good work. Please solve that problem as soon as you can. Last but not least, we have Associate Professor Dean Mills from the University of Southern Queensland. Dean.
Thanks very much, John, and thank you everybody for attending today and inviting us to talk. So our technology is looking at quantum sensors and wearable sensors for injury prevention in youth athletes. So as we all know, youth athletes are going to be the future of the 2032 Brisbane Games. It's going to be amazing for us as well. Now, we really need to keep those athletes training, and we need them ready for competition as well. Unfortunately, though, lots of youth athletes and adolescent athletes suffer with ruptures of the Achilles cruciate ligaments, the ACL as well. And it seems to be becoming over the years more and more common in these youth athletes. Now, unfortunately as well, female athletes seem to be 4 to 6 times greater to have this same injury as well. And we think that's probably due to greater participation rates. We also know physiologically as well, their knees and their joints are slightly different to their male counterparts. So how do we diagnose, how do we objectively determine then these injuries and the potential risk for them as well? Well, at the moment, it's really subjective. What we currently do is we get the athlete to undertake some exercises. These might be hopping, skipping, jumping exercises. They might undertake a push-up, a sit-up, and a coach or a sports scientist, they'll watch them. And what they'll do is they'll scale them, typically 1 to 5, and if they've got any muscle imbalances, any movement dysfunction, any issues that they can see with the way they land or the way they jump as well. There's a big problem with this. It's incredibly subjective. One coach might scale them at a 5 and say, no, they're absolutely perfect. They're good to go. Another coach sitting on the other side might give them a 1 and say, look, there is a problem here as well. So incredibly subjective. We also know it's not reliable as well, this methodology. So day to day, we might rate them on a different scale as well. So we need some objective measurements to be able to do that and identify that injury risk. If we can identify that injury risk, we can put in some training programs, some strengthening exercise, some different things to protect them from injury and keep them ready for competition. There are some objective approaches out there. One includes 3-dimensional motion capture. This is incredibly expensive. We're talking about $250,000 for a setup. It requires a laboratory space. Many youth athletes do not have access to this as well. We can also look at force plates as well, which are plates within the ground that we can ask our youth athletes to jump on, and we can measure the forces that are produced as well. Again, quite expensive, difficult for our youth athletes to work. So what we're going to do is leverage our ongoing expertise in quantum mechanics and quantum physics to use that to measure force where the athletes jump quite simply, and also leverage our semiconductor technology as well to measure angles and movement of those athletes in real time. Hopefully where we want to get to in the next few years is we can actually embed this technology within even an athlete's shoe, in the garments they're wearing. This means we can predict injury risk in real time. We can also prevent them from occurring injuries, maintain their training, and then they're ready to earn us some gold medals for that upcoming 2032 Brisbane Olympic and Paralympic Games.
Well, fantastic. I think that's very exciting. So here's how it's going to work, panelists. I have 3 questions. The first 2 questions I will throw to 2 of you. So we'll do 2 questions to each, an answer. And then the final question I'll throw to all of you. There's a chance to wrap up. I'm going to subjectively be evaluating the quality of your answers on a 10-point scale, because Dean has not come up with an objective method for me to do this yet. No, of course I won't. And then we'll have an opportunity to take questions from the floor for the remainder of the session. So let's kick it off now that we know the rules of engagement. How do the new quantum solutions that you're exploring in these projects compare with existing technologies currently available on the market? And what do you see as the advantage or improvement that your team hopes to gain? I'm going to go back to Eleanor for that question first off.
Thank you. So actually the interesting thing with the concussion project is that this technique of measuring magnetic fields in order to understand brain function is actually something that already exists. And it's something that already does make use of quantum technology in the form of squid magnetometers. So what we're doing here is not necessarily trying to bring quantum to a problem for the first time, but actually explore alternative quantum technologies that could be applied to the same problem to try and overcome some of the pitfalls in the existing technology. So squid magnetometers are incredibly good at picking up on the magnetic fields that are emitted by your brain. They're very sensitive, they're particularly sensitive, or they can be tailored to be particularly sensitive to the frequencies that your brain typically emits. However, one drawback of them in as far as our goals is that because they are based on superconducting technology, they have to be operated at cryogenic temperatures. So what that means is we can't just design a helmet, put these sensors in them and put them on an athlete's head. We actually have to contain these sensors in some kind of fridge setup. And typically these fridges can be incredibly bulky, very expensive, not only to purchase, but also to operate. So in terms of having a practical solution to concussion in sport and being able to create a device that can be brought to the side of a sports pitch, these kinds of sensors are quite impractical. So what we're looking at is using different types of quantum systems and building magnetometers based on those that can be operated at room temperature and incorporated into a much more compact machine so that it can be used more comfortably and also more quickly in a sports context. So we're looking at things like the quantum behavior of atoms and how they respond to magnetic fields. These types of magnetometers are already commercially available, and so for our sort of initial designs, we're incorporating those into a magnetically shielded helmet. But we're also in parallel with that developing our own magnetometers based on cavity optomechanics. So looking at how we can couple the behavior of light in a cavity to the deformation of a material that changes its shape in response to a magnetic field, and use that to sort of read out how strong and what frequency the magnetic fields are that this material is put in the presence of. I have, I think, some examples to show, but I forgot to bring them up here. But if you find me a bit later on, I can show you some examples of these devices. They can be built very compact and even put on silicon chips. And so what we're working on is trying to sort of tailor that technology to make it as sensitive as possible to brain signals so that we can create our own device that replaces these sort of bulky fridge requiring squid magnetometers with something that's a lot more practical for use in a sporting context.
And thanks for clarifying. I had an image of a refrigerator on someone's head for a moment. Which, Eleanor, how are you working, or is this coming? Are you working with athletes on the design of this equipment?
Yeah, so there's a lot of collaboration as part of this project, of course. So we're working not only with athletes that will help us to understand the sort of requirements to make this comfortable and make it something that they would want to put on their head if concussed or if at risk of concussion, but also with people from the Queensland Brain Institute who, of course, have a lot of experience working with concussion patients and know what sort of comfortability requirements would have to be in place in order for someone to want to use this device.
Thank you very much. Lachlan, might go to you next, if that's okay. To refresh your mind, new quantum solutions, you're exploring how it levels up with existing technology, what the novel application is, what improvement you hope to make.
Yeah, and it's absolutely a fantastic question, because when you come down to the brass tacks of it, from an industry perspective, right, what are you looking to do? You're trying to get the most effective answer or the most effective solution for the lowest cost and the quickest time frame, right? So there's a really economic incentive here. And we're really blessed. I mean, if we talk about the field of operations research, which characterizes all these bus scheduling problems, which I was talking about earlier, we've really benefited from 70 years of just unparalleled research in this field. So already starting off, quantum's got a lot of competition here, just by virtue of the fact that we're already very, very, very good at solving these problems. Saying that, we have good reason to believe, based on theory, now I know theory is not practice, but very good mathematics done by researchers here in Queensland, which shows that once quantum computers become good enough, once they obtain fault tolerance, once we leave this era where they're noisy and small scale, we expect and know we will have real tangible benefits. And a lot of you might know this. So for example, if you went home this afternoon, you could literally operate on a quantum computer that exists right now. So if you go to the IBM Quantum Experience, so this is IBM, you can sign up for an account and you can run real quantum algorithms today, literally for free on a quantum computer. If there's any teachers in the audience here tonight, this would be a wonderful opportunity, I think, to show your students. It's a great interactive platform. But if you do that, what you'll note is that the quantum computers we have now, I really couldn't recommend anyone to say that they're going to give you a tangible benefit today, right? You're not going to get a better solution on a currently existing quantum computer in 2026 than you are going to be using an established software suite for these operational problems, right? It's just not going to happen. The technology is not there yet, which is why we really have to look forward for this legacy. You really have to look forward towards the future and start planning now. So if you're an industry leader now and you're looking forward and you're going, how can I integrate quantum into my company's technology or solution stack? What you really need to do is you need to look far ahead. You need to look at the roadmaps that these quantum companies are putting out. And the technology is improving very, very quickly. And it would be a good time now, I would suggest, to start planning for the future. Where could I integrate quantum into my solutions? What contacts can I build today which are going to serve my company in the future? So to summarize, quantum computing, we have very good theoretical reasons to believe, proofs we will get advantage. Does not exist today, but we really can look forward to a very promising future with quantum computing. And I'm really happy that Queensland's going to be an absolute leader in this field.
Thanks, Lachlan. If I may, I'll go on to the next question. There are some interesting industry partners involved in each of these projects. What role are they playing? And how are these industry collaborations contributing to real-world impact? I might start with you, Tyler, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a few industry partners in our grant. So one of those is Mog Labs, who's a laser manufacturer. Probably a few people in the audience know them. We also have the Australian Sports Technology Network and Evidence Scientific. But in the sort of early stage of the program, we've been kind of focused on the technology development, and so we've been working actually quite closely with Mog Labs. And I think that's an interesting aspect is that, we're sort of talking about these, bang whiz, big time applications of what you can do with these quantum systems. But of course, making those applications and measurements come to life involves a lot of the engineering aspects of these systems. And so working directly with the companies who have that expertise to produce the things that we're going to use to interrogate our atoms, which are, primarily lasers, and going back and forth and developing. But for them as an Australian company, as a product that they're just come out with, like we have one of the first models of it. We've given them new design specifications they've had to adapt to as part of this partnership, and those are things that will enhance their business profile and their product for the global market. And so, that's nothing to do with medical sensing so far, right? But I think indicative of the sort of broader reach, which I think is a big intent in this program as well.
What have you learned so far working with your industry partners? Has it gone well? Are there things that you've had to adapt? And there's always a tension, I think, between research and industry. Any insights for the audience who might be looking at a academic collaboration on down the road if they don't already have one?
I think, this isn't necessarily a specific example about the working with the industry partner that I was just mentioning, but just the general mindset. So I would say prior to really becoming involved in this project, I didn't really have the mindset as an academic researcher that what I was doing in the lab was relevant to industry and connected to real world problems. And so one of the things I really found most rewarding, I guess, about this grant program in the first place was that, it presented this opportunity to go out and, talk to industry, find partnerships, find, forms of co-funding, and transform that sort of narrow-minded, all I'm doing is going to be interesting to, my relatively small academic community around the world, but instead is, potentially quite impactful for many people in Queensland and Australia and worldwide. And, medical sensing technology is a sector in which, you really can imagine that broad and, extremely impactful outcomes from this research. And so I think there's a lot of reward in just, sort of interacting with those people in industry. There's a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of excitement about the future possibilities and really, how these sort of very academic aspects of quantum mechanics actually can have these large, translatable, important impacts that really affect people's everyday lives. So that's sort of my takeaway, is that it's really been an eye-opening experience interacting with the industry in the first place.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Dean, over to you.
No worries. Thanks, John. So our industry engagement is probably a bit different from the other people's, really. Our industry engagement is with the athletes. So they are at the front of the coalface. They're the ones we want to serve. They're the ones we want to win gold medals as well. And the way we've been working with those is twofold. First of all, we got a collaborator within the team, Professor Stephen Bird. He's the Director of High Performance Sport at the University of Southern Queensland. He's also been to 5 different Olympic Games over the years as a sports scientist, helping the athlete out as well. And I've been working with him for probably the last 10 years. And the one thing he said to me as well, we just do not have a good way of evaluating whether these athletes are at risk of injury or not. We've got a system and it kind of works, and sometimes we pick it up, sometimes we doesn't. So if you can get something and employ that and objectively measure it, that is fantastic. Our other external collaborator as well is with Michael Seeler. He's a director at sport at one of our local schools in Ipswich at the Bremer School. 2 things he picked up over the last few years is, firstly, female athlete engagement is going through the roof, which is an amazing thing to see. He said, I've got females knocking on my door saying, I want to have a go on that sport. I want to do that. The other thing he told us as well, they are picking up injuries a lot as well. And again, we have no way of assessing that correctly and objectively enough as well. So they're the 2 people that are at the coalface. They're external collaborators that help us understand that is the problem. What do we need to do? The solution, well, I'm an exercise physiologist by trade as well. So my knowledge about quantum and about physics is not that great, but I've got some fantastic internal collaborators that I work with. I've got Dr. Tone Din as well, who's who's an engineer by trade as well. I've been working on for the last few years, looking at wearable sensor technology as well. And we've got another collaborator as well from the University of Technology, Sydney, in Toan Tran as well, who works on that quantum physics. So what I did was took that problem essentially, went to see my engineering guys who gave me loads of information about what we could do. I put all that information together, and I think we can solve this problem if we come together as a team as well. And so far, it's been really, really enjoyable as well. Sometimes the engineering team come to me and say, well, can you test these on the athletes? And I said, well, yeah, this is easy. We can do this. Sometimes I come to them with things I think are really challenging to do and to measure, and they say, we can do this. It's not an issue. So as a collaboration goes, it's been really fantastic opportunity to bring physiology, sports science, and engineering to one big team.
I think that's really, you make so many important points there, but I really love in your work how you've started this journey from conception with a problem that was in the field already. This is something athletes are experiencing, and then bring them and coaches and other professionals along on the journey with you. I remember sitting in a room very similar to this with Pat Howard having a discussion about quantum applications. And one of the things that Pat really emphasized was you can have all kinds of great innovations in technology, but if the coaches don't want to use it, if the athletes are skeptical about it, then it won't penetrate, it won't get through. So I think what you're doing is really an embodiment of best practice in this area. So congratulations on that. Keep the microphone, so I'm going to go to you first this time. The last question is really around the 2032 games, really a legacy question. We've used this term quite a bit. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver something really, really unique for decades to come. I've got here a time limit, but I won't be too rigid on that. In 2 minutes or less, what is the greatest impact or legacy you think your project will have?
Ultimately, what we'd like to see is more gold medals. That's it. But that is basically
Done.
what we'd like to see. Ultimately, I was around, you can tell from my dodgy accent, I'm from England originally, and I was around the London 2012 Olympics. The impact that had on the city and the nation from athletes winning medals was incredible. It brought the country together. If our project can help an athlete just by 1%, and we got to remember here, 1% sometimes is the difference becoming gold medal and coming sixth. If we can do that, that's a fantastic achievement. Going further, we would like to end up commercializing our project. That's where we'd like to go as well. What we see, we've got measurement sensors that are wearable. We would like to see these in garments as well, placed on people. And these, now it won't be athletes. It will be regular Joe Bloggs, someone like me going down to the gym, wanting to know, can I stretch my leg as much as I should be able to? Can I rotate my arm as much as I can do? We also want to embed these sensors as well in shoes. Can I jump as high as I think I should do? And that's where we see the other part of our project going as well. So yeah, thank you.
It's such an important point. I like to use a date every once in a while, 1976. As a Canadian, that was the year that Montreal hosted the Olympics, and we won no medals in that Olympics. And Australia did not much better. And really the birth of the Australian Institute of Sport came following that. I think it's really important to remember, as important as it is to tackle the traffic problem, as important it is to have great venues and everything else, the games ultimately will be judged on the performance of athletes on the field. I think you're absolutely right. Who's next? Tyler. Over to Tyler, please. Legacy question.
Yeah. So so it's a good question, and it seems like a long time away, but I think it's going to come very quickly that 2032 happens. I think this research grant program really is an opportunity to kind of develop these game-changing, really refined new ways of approaching medical technologies and sensing, and have those happening in Queensland. It's about supporting the athletes, but it's also about this area of medical sensing and medical technology and sports technology, where we can really see this growing as an industry in Southeast Queensland more generally. And so I sort of see that out of this outcome of this grant program, we have as I said, quantum sensing being a very near-term application of quantum technologies, that we have a growth in this quantum sensing sector within Queensland leading up to the games as part of this. And I think, I mean, each of the things that we've talked about here are not technologies that are just specifically focused on what's happening in 2032. Improving medical sensing, improving, in my case, monitoring of heart signals, improving this aspect of having not having to have the contact of the sensors on the skin can have huge differences in sort of rural clinic contexts, neonatal care where you can't put sensors on premature babies, for example, continuous monitoring for like sleep studies and things. There's all sorts of other aspects to which this technology will be impactful, and I think that's the case for everything we've talked about in this panel.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the Olympics and the Paralympics will be a very, very short period of time, but part of what we're seeing here is laying the foundation for legacy for decades to come and using this as an excuse to innovate in areas that, again, we probably should have been innovating in the first place, but if this is a catalyst for that innovation, then it's a great opportunity. Lachlan.
Yeah, absolutely. Has anyone ever been to an event? Maybe you've been to a great concert or something like that, and then the event ends and you spend hours and hours in the car park trying to get out. Well, I think in terms of legacy, I think that's the one thing that we want to avoid with our bus optimization. So if people can get in and out of the Olympic Games efficiently, I would consider that a huge success. But secondly, that's the great thing about algorithms is that you can transplant them from one quantum computer to the other. So when we talk about a legacy, what we want is something that lasts. We want something that people are still going to be using in 20, 30, 40 years, which is completely interchangeable. And so one of our real goals with working with transport and main roads is that we integrate our quantum algorithms into their existing and developing technology solution stacks. So that means 5 years down the road, when they have to do maybe some optimization of some other network, or 10 years, or 20 years, they can rely on these systems and algorithms that we've developed so that we get this long-lasting impact within Australia's and Queensland's public transport network. And then finally, we talk about life in the planet, working with electric buses. Obviously, it's clean, green energy. This is what we want to see. And I hope that this work also develops and leads to realizations where we can put quantum technology, and in particular quantum algorithms, into more of these decarbonization protocols and decarbonization goals. And it's wonderful that we also have Cubic here, based in Queensland, which is working towards a similar thing. So that I think there's some wonderful symbiosm throughout Queensland working towards quantum technology for the future.
Last word in this segment, Eleanor.
So yeah, I think the legacy we're hoping for from the concussion project is twofold. So on the one hand, there's the portability aspect of the technology that we're developing. And I think Dean already articulated this really well, that if we can create something that could be used to keep athletes safe on an Olympic level from injury, in our case from concussion, then I don't see why that same technology couldn't be applied to a more broad set of locations, bringing it to school sports fields or to hospitals in more remote parts of Queensland and also further afield. The Olympics will be a great opportunity to showcase the sort of rich culture of sport here, and I think in order to reflect that with our legacy, we have to make sure that the technology that we develop for keeping athletes safe on an Olympic level is also applicable to ordinary people participating in sport every day. The second aspect of legacy that we're hoping for with this technology kind of goes a little bit away from the sports science. So our focus at the moment is using a machine that can measure brain function for diagnosing concussion. But of course, once you have that machine, you can also use it for studying a wider variety of mental health conditions. So this technique is known to be applicable to studies of epilepsy and PTSD. And so once we develop this technology and we give it to neuroscientists, then they will be able to hopefully use it in a much broader range of neuroscience contexts as well.
And of course, concussions exist in a number of different fields, so the application outside of sport.
Of course,
as well,
yeah.
Wonderful. Now it's your turn, audience. Do we have any questions for these panelists?
That's a very good question. And also one of the challenges in, I think, industry collaborating with universities. The university typically, basically, the creator, when these agreements are finalized, usually we end up in a situation where it's the person whose idea retains the IP. So this is potentially it's not something we've encountered in this particular example, but that's generally where these agreements end up in my limited experience.
Other questions?
Thanks, John. Yeah, really important as well. We do see applications outside of sports science directly. We do see applications in physiotherapy as well. What they typically would use to measure joint angles and range of motions is things like goniometers. They're really good and they're really simple, really cheap, really easy to use. What sometimes then clients will want from that is, well, can I just do that at home? Can I go and measure that joint angle? Can I measure that range of motion in my shoulder injury after that period of rehab where I can't go and see a physio? And so where we see is applications to that, what we see is if we can embed these sensors within garments, wearable garments, then somebody can just do that at home. So yeah, we really see that. We see that for avenues such as podiatry. We see it in physiotherapy as well, where people are looking at improving the range of motion or the change in where their joint angles could be as well. So yeah, brilliant question. Thank you.
One conveniently at the very back of the room.
Thank you. Yeah. So just question for everyone. How successful have you been so far in raising funds for your respective projects? Given that, 2032 is not that away, and if that's the legacy question, then cash is king at this point. So, and if you had an ask, I guess, from the audience, what would that be? Thanks.
It's now become Dragon's Den, which is good. That's takers first. Eleanor, quick. Put you on the spot.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I am not super involved with the funding attainment for this project, so I'm not sure I'm the best person.
You always ask for money, Eleanor. No.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, as Dean mentioned, for studying more physiological injuries and that kind of thing, there is obviously a commercialization potential there, and I think anything that could be used more broadly than just on a specific cohort of people, I think there's opportunities for commercialization there as well. So of course that brings in money, but also as you mentioned when we were talking about legacy, concussion isn't something that's exclusive to sports science, and there are plenty of different sort of organizations that are interested in us developing a way of learning more about concussion. So if you look at things like soldiers who are involved or in close proximity to blast impacts, they're at a higher risk of concussion than your average person. So there's sort of opportunities for funding from anyone, I suppose, who's interested in us developing the technology that would allow them to learn more about how to keep people in their organization safe as well.
Any other?
No, thank you for that. And it's really important, right? Cash is king here. We're lucky enough to be sponsored for this project from the Queensland government, which we thank you very, very much for this as well. Where we are at the moment is with the development stage of the sensor technology. We've already got a 5-year experience and lead up into that. So this will be ready in the next year. Our next stage for this project then is testing it on athletes. What we typically do with this technology is we look at the validity, i.e. can it measure what it says it measures? And we look at the reliability of it. Does it measure the same thing day in, day out as well. The next phase for us as well will be looking at some investment capital then to translate that technology into then a commercial application, i.e. can we embed these into garments as well? What we'd like to do with that is the partnership with a company that can help to us produce that as well. Whether that's a sportswear manufacturer, whether it's somebody else, we would then look into that, and that's where we'd like to go next, the next stage of funding as well. But we're really appreciative of the funding we've got already, because that helps us get to that next stage, and then hopefully to pay back then our funders initially by starting to employ people and start bringing investments and jobs as well back into it.
Anyone else? We're good? Would you? Oh,
I just do the sums. It's more hard for me to talk about funding and investment.
Excellent. Cash is king. We know that. Can you please join me in a round of applause for this excellent panel? Thank you.